Sisters and brothers, ladies and gentlemen, friends, neighbors, comrades, all citizens of the world, wherever you're going, wherever you've been, and wherever you're at, we welcome you to the Live from the Heartland show here on YouTube. New episodes air every Friday at 9 a.m. Central Time with individual interviews posted throughout the following week. I'm your host, Michael James, encouraging you to take the chain from the brain, to get back in the people's game, because it's time to move from the lower level to the higher, from the shallower to the deeper, from the one-sided to the many, and from the abstract to the concrete. So without further ado, let's get it on. Hello, everybody out there, and welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. This one is for the week of January 27th, and we are recording it on a very gray Monday, the 22nd, here in Chicago, up in the 49th Ward. Today, we're going to have three guests. We're going to bring on our sometimes co-host and our sometimes producer, Katy Hogan, to talk about the work of Network 49 and the Bring Chicago Home initiative to get rid of homelessness in Chicago. We're going to have Amy Nelson Christensen from Loyola School of Education talking about a project to help migrant kids going to school in Chicago. And we're going to bring on a friend from way out in Oregon, James W. Russell, who's been a guest on the show several times. And this time he's going to talk about retirement. He has a new book out. So with all that said, let's get going. I want to just talk a little bit about politics. I get kind of optimistic that we can not have the orange-haired guy ascend to the presidency again. You know, his victory in Iowa was 110,000 people out of that was 15% of all Republicans. And the way the reporting went was he did not pick up a lot of support in the suburbs like of Des Moines. And you remember that the white women in suburbs is a variable in elections these days. There are a lot of people who are pessimistic about the future. There are people who don't recognize what Biden has done. We're going to stay on it. But I just want to encourage people to get ready to do a lot of work. It's up to us how the election will go. A little good report that I read from an email I get called Spark of Genius. And this one reads, deforestation in Brazil's Amazon fell by nearly 50% in 2023 compared to 2022. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva pledged to end deforestation by 2030 when he took office a year ago. Preliminary data from National Space Agency showed 5,153 square kilometers of the Amazon were cleared in 2023, down from 10,278 square kilometers in 2022. Rainforest destruction had surged to a 12-year high under his predecessor, the right-wing Jair Bolsonaro. Okay. Football's getting close to being over. We've got the semifinals coming up next week. Then there'll be a Super Bowl, and then it'll be it. We can focus on basketball and be rooting for baseball. All right, Hal. That's Hal, our engineer, my son, Hal James. Thank you, Hal. Give us a little tune, and then we'll be right back with our first guest, our good friend, Katy Hogan, who happens to be her birthday today, the 22nd.
We need some time to talk with you. It's not the time for easy lies about the things we all must do. And it's no time for alibis, people crying and thinking about the revolution, wondering if there's time.
Hey, all you citizens of the world, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of January 27th. And we are recording on the 22nd, which just happens to be Katy Hogan's birthday. And Katy Hogan just happens to be our next guest. Sometimes she's a host, sometimes she's a co-host, sometimes she's a co-producer, and sometimes I can't find her because she's off busy doing other things. So hello to you, Katy Hogan, and happy birthday.
Hello, Michael James, and happy birthday back at you a week later.
Well, it's good. While I was hiding out over here watching football and sports during this heavy cold spell, which appears to have broken, you were busy marshaling other folks and making phone calls about a very important project that Network 49 is very much involved with. How about starting to fill us in on what you've been doing?
Yeah, Network 49 is the progressive independent political organization of the 49th Ward, which you are also a member of the steering committee. It's a great group that is engaged in, I think, always some really important work, starting with the education committee that got a referendum on the ballot some 5 years ago to put a moratorium or a cease on expansion of charter schools in our ward, and moving on with the um, community safety committee that held the feet to the fire in terms of the police accountability on the consent decree, and is still actively a member of that citywide coalition to um, make our police department better. And currently, the next big thing that we're dealing with is this Bring Chicago Home referendum that is on the ballot in the primary this March 19th. It's the last thing on the ballot. It's a referendum that is basically proposing we raise real estate transfer tax, sometimes referred to as RETT. Everyone pays a transfer tax when they buy property. It just varies in degree and percentage. What this proposes is what is so-called a mansion tax, meaning properties, whether they're commercial or domestic, over $1 million price tag gets a raised RETT, transfer tax, which is why they call it the mansion tax. Simultaneously, this particular piece of legislation proposes alongside of that real estate lower than $1 million cost has a decrease in the percentage of RETT. So the result of this would be that 95% of property buyers in our city would actually experience a lessening of that tax, whereas those who can afford it, that's the presumption, will pay slightly more. And the emphasis is on slightly. Let's see. The purpose of that is to fund a dedicated fund to address homelessness and affordable housing in Chicago. We have not enough affordable housing. CHA, one of the least well-organized government bodies we've got at this point, is sitting on acres and acres of empty land where previous mayors tore down the projects that housed so much problems, so many ills for the people living in it, and were an inhumane housing of thousands of people in Chicago for a long, long time. An embarrassment.
Let me just throw in for people who are listening and may not know, CHA is the Chicago Housing Authority.
Right.
Been around a long time.
Right. So they have not kept up. They did not replace those units with affordable units. They're way behind on all of that. So the RETT, the mansion tax, or Bring Chicago Home, proposes to develop a fund specifically dedicated to doing the work that hasn't been done to both acquire and promote affordable housing, as well as to address homelessness in a fashion that also provides wraparound services. They use that phrase, meaning helping people who may have been shelterless for a long time get accustomed to having a roof over their heads, which, believe it or not, is a huge deal when people get off the streets and finally have an enclosed space. It can be a fairly terrifying experience, as well as eventually a secure one, and one that should eventually bring people real peace and comfort. But it does require some attention and some assistance. So the mansion tax, the Bring Chicago Home referendum is about addressing that. It's a somewhat radical, except it's not new. It has worked in other cities across the nation. San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, all have some version of the Bring Chicago Home RETT, and um, and they've had good success with it. They also have learned some lessons on how to not do it, and so that we have a little bit of a path laid for us ahead. What we're doing right now, Network 49 in coalition with many groups across the entire city, but in our neck of the woods, the 40th ward, the 47th ward, a lot of people, 48th ward, are engaged in this coalition, making phone calls, canvassing door to door, which has been a little difficult with the polar freeze. But this week, we're going to actually add a couple of weekday canvasses for anybody who wants to. Give us a call. Wednesday and Friday, we will send out people to knock doors in our ward to let people know about this. The terrible voter turnout, even in general elections, is something we should be ashamed of. And so raising people's awareness that, one, there is an election in Chicago, March 19th, and two, there's something really important on the ballot, which will not appear on the ballot in the general. So people don't quite always know that. They go, oh, well, I'll get a second whack at it in November. No, you won't. This is the only chance to vote for it. This is the only chance to pass it, so that then it will be given to the city council to fashion the legislation needed to develop the fund and put people in charge of it.
Katy, let me ask you, what
Yeah.
is the response that you've been getting just on the phone banking?
So, yeah, we it's positive. People, when you explain it to folks, they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm for that." And that's because we have in our ward a pretty progressive base, and also not a lot of big wealthy home buyers. So it's people who understand this is something that's needed. We also have an alderwoman who so deftly and dealt with the tent city that had developed in our park at Tui Park a couple of years ago, up to 70 or 80 people. She rehoused in the course of a year of really working on it. It was in the first year of her first term. She is to be really singled out for her
It's been
efforts.
great. There was a lot of like grumbling around it, and people blaming crime on it. A lot of that, and then she just put it through and said, "We're going to get rid of this situation." But they were going to build a shelter in that old North Shore Hospital building on Clark. Is that happening still?
I actually don't know the current status of that. There were some building issues, which was predictable. It was meant for different use. I do believe it is still on its way to becoming some housing, but she had already housed most of the people in the park in found housing for them in other ways. So basically, will get a lot of headwind from the real estate people. Folks who will try and scare folks and tell them this is going to just ruin Chicago. I think what actually has a much bigger chance of ruining Chicago is making this a one-class city where no one can afford to live in half of the neighborhoods. And
Katy, in our remaining moments or so, because I'm sure we're going to talk about this more. I know we will. Can you tell people how they can get involved, how to contact you or Network 49 and participate not only in the phone banking, but even knocking on doors or talking to people at shopping centers? Give us some info.
One North Side and is the coordinator in our neck of the woods of the coalition. So if you're not in our neighborhood here in the 49th ward, you can go to One North Side or look for bringchicagohome.org. And there's a mobilized sign up there for action. you should definitely take action. It's not that hard. Phoning people, everybody goes, oh, I don't want to phone. I don't want to knock on doors. Like, I'm sorry, that is the way we do it. That is the way we make a change. And we should get used to it because we have a much bigger challenge later this year.
And one more time, the election, it's the primary,
It's
is
the
March
primary.
19th.
Yes, March 19th. Early voting starts March 5th in all the neighborhoods. You can get a mail-in ballot via the application process at Board of Elections. So yeah, I know we're running out of time, but thanks for letting us talk about it.
Well, I'm glad, and I'll see you later, and happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Everybody out there in our listening land, wherever you may be, stay tuned. We're going to be right back after a real short musical break with Amy Nelson Christensen of the Loyola School of Education about a project to get needed equipment for young kids, migrants going to Chicago public schools. Stay tuned here on the left end of your dial.
Long distance runner, what you standing there for? Get up, get on, get out of the door. You're playing cold music on the barroom floor.
Welcome back, all you citizens of the world. You're listening to Live from the Heartland, or you might be watching it. Our next guest is someone I don't know yet, but I'm going to get to know her through the course of this conversation. She is the one and only Amy C. Nelson Christensen, and she is an associate professor of the School of Education. She can fill you in on those details at Loyola University, which is kind of our home base for this radio show. It originated with WLUW doing it live on the stage at the Heartland, and now it's by Zoom. And I'm really glad to meet Amy. Hello to you, Amy Nelson Christensen.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yes, I am a clinical assistant professor in the School of Education here at Loyola University Chicago. I'm also the Associate Dean for Inclusive Excellence and Strategic Innovation. And I'm so grateful to have this time with you today.
Well, those are a lot of titles, and we can go
Yeah.
into that more when we talk. But what really caught my attention was that you're involved in a project with the School of Education to help get necessary school supplies, I believe,
Yeah.
for 5,000 plus migrant kids who are now in the Chicago public schools. Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about how this came to be, what it is, and how people can help out.
Yeah. So about August, we have a strong partnership with Chicago Public Schools as the School of Education because a lot of our students do their field experiences or student teaching there. And we were collaborating as a community member. We learned that CPS was facing a large influx of newcomer students, and we define newcomer students as students who they typically are refugees or asylum seekers, migrants who are new to the community. So we call them newcomers. And as you've probably heard in the news, there were migrants being bussed in and flown in, and there were waves of students that were just families coming through, and a lot of them had young children that needed to be enrolled in school. CPS was not expecting to have this large influx of newcomers. And since August, they've welcomed well over 5,000 students. And so as we look to the new year, we are also looking to make sure that the students that they're welcoming have the necessary school supplies, the foundational needs that they have besides food, water, shelter. They also need school supplies in order to access their learning. And so we partnered with Chicago Public Schools to understand the schools that were the hardest hit, and received a list of supplies that they need in terms of school supplies. And then we partnered with Impacts, which is a company that specializes in getting school supplies to schools and communities based on what they need. And we're really grateful for not only our continuing partnership with Chicago Public Schools, but also our new partnership with Impacts to create a school supply drive that will help us meet this increasing need, not only for the students that we've already welcomed since August, but the new students that we continue to welcome throughout the rest of the school year.
Amy Nelson Christensen, how many of these kids are in like the 49th Ward or close to Loyola? And are any of the schools that are heavily impacted in our area, or is it beyond?
So you can call me Amy, by the way.
Good.
Because that is a mouthful in and of itself.
I didn't even put the C in.
So what I would say is that they're actually all over the city. So the schools, the way that Chicago Public Schools handles their enrollment is they try to get the students in the schools that are closest to where they're currently living. That also does lead to some transitioning throughout the city. So I would say that they are in the, they try to put them in schools where there's the largest capacity. We have schools throughout the city, particularly in the Rogers Park neighborhood, that are the most equipped or have the most capacity because they already have newcomer centers and they've been working with students from migrant families or newcomer families for years. And then we also have schools that are kind of new to this, the needs of newcomer students. And so they're all over the city and they're clustered around where newcomers are staying, particularly at shelters. And that can be in flux based on when they go from, temporary shelters or housing to something that might be a little bit more long-term.
Well, I'm liking this because, I do always, in my own view of the world, welcome migrants and people seeking asylum. I also am pretty interested in what causes that. And I do blame our own government a lot on conditions in South America, et cetera. What are the specific things that people need, these kids need? I mean, pencils, do they need clothes, any of that? And is it something where you're asking people to donate money or actually the stuff?
Yeah, we're asking for money. So the schools have provided us with a supply list. Impacts then took those supply lists and estimated how much it would cost to cover all of the things that they've asked for. They've asked for things like you mentioned, pencils. They've also asked for things like backpacks. Students are coming with nothing, absolutely nothing. They don't even have a backpack to put books in or anything like that. Paper, notebooks. So just basic school supplies that families just don't have the capacity to go and get. Some of these families are completely new to the American educational system. So they're not even aware of what the needs might be. So being able to just hand them a backpack full of everything that they need, or to go into a classroom where the teacher already has all the supplies necessary in order to just give to the student whenever they need it. They don't even have to ask for it. It really makes a big difference. So pretty much like basic things like papers, pencils, backpacks, and those kinds of things, even like pencil boxes to keep all their supplies together in one spot. And I think that, so based on that, we're asking for donations at $20 increments. You can make as many donations at $20 each as you want. So you can make 5 donations of $100 for $20 each, and that goes directly to the school. So we will use that money to then purchase all the supplies that the schools have requested, and then the supplies will go directly to the school. They don't have to go pick it up at some central location. Impacts, again, they do this for a living. It's what they do. They will ship it directly to the school. So then all the school has to do is give them to the teachers or give them to the students when they come into the schools.
Let me ask you, is Impact a for-profit company or a not-for-profit?
They are a not-for-profit. They actually started in Minnesota very similarly for a similar cause. I think they're from the Twin Cities. And they also have experienced their own migrant influx. And when they were faced with having to support students as they were coming into their schools in Minnesota, they had to figure out how they were going to get supplies into these communities, and Impact stepped up.
Amy, how's it going so far?
So far, we have only raised a few $100s, and we would love for any listener who feels compelled to support this cause to please check out School of Education at Loyola University Chicago's social media, Facebook. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn to find out how you can access the link, the donation page through Impacts to donate.
What are the specifics with LinkedIn and Facebook? Because it's Loyola School of Education.
Yes. So Loyola University Chicago School of Education is our handle.
Do you have a goal for how much money you're trying to raise?
We would like to raise $100,000 in order to cover the costs of the supplies that the schools have requested.
So we have a ways to go. So hopefully,
We have quite a ways to go, and our deadline is February 5th.
okay, well, this is good. And do you have any other projects in the future in mind and doing good in the world?
We have a lot of projects at Loyola, particularly focused on our newcomer students at Loyola broadly. So we do have a winter drive campaign. So if you also are following Loyola University Chicago on social media as well, you can find out more information there. And we have also a lot of neighborhood events that we are supporting.
Well, I really want to thank you for coming on, Amy. And I do hope I meet you in person someday. And
Likewise.
as we like to say, keep doing good in the world, because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that all the people who are going to donate to this project will do.
Yes. Thank you for having me. And again, that aligns to Loyola's mission of faith that does justice.
Right on, sister. And everybody stay tuned to Live from the Heartland. We're going to be back with our interview with an old friend, James Russell, talking about something that the older among us are interested in, retirement and retirement funds. We'll be right back. Stay tuned here on the left end of your dial.
I'm an old school player. They know my name up and down the line. I'm an old school player. They know my name up and down the line. Doing it a long time.
Okay, welcome back, everybody who's listening or watching Live from the Heartland for the week of January 27th. And now our next guest is someone I've known back since the 1960s. We were both active members of the Students for a Democratic Society. He went on to be quite a professor, both on the East Coast, down in Texas for a while, up there in the Northwest. He is the author of, I think, 8 books. And he was most recently on the show talking about the time he helped to integrate schools at a town in Oklahoma. So welcome to you, James W. Russell.
Hi, thanks, Mike.
Good
Happy
to
to be
see you.
here.
You look
as
good in a
always.
tie there, brother.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I keep finding out about you is that you have more and more books, and you've put out a couple of books on retirement, and most recently, you have a book called A Labor Guide to Retirement. I'm a little older than you. I just hit 82. Retirement is something that we thought would happen. In a way, it happened for me, but in a way, we're both still working away. So talk about your book and what led you to devote a bunch of attention to this Labor Guide to Retirement.
Well, I was involved in a struggle in Connecticut when I discovered that the 401k type plan that I had was that I was paying about twice as much into it, and I'd get half the benefits of people my colleagues who were in a pension plan instead. And so I started a movement, a rank and file union movement, which resulted in us being able to convert our 401k money into pension credits. And that resulted in a much better retirement for me. And in the course of all of that, I had to learn everything I could about pension plans and 401ks and so forth. So I ended up writing a couple of books about it. And one of the things I discovered, the motive for this last book, is that there are a lot of people in the labor movement who really don't know as much as they should know about pension plans, because they may be in the position of having to negotiate them. They're certainly in the position of having to explain them to members. And this is something that I thought was really needed, was a guide so that people could really be brought up to speed and really understand what was going on.
Who is as a guy who's also putting out some books and some more, who's reading your book? And I mean, you've got this guide for people in the labor movement and beyond about things they should know. You think people are paying attention? Are you able to reach some people with it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all the time getting emails from people who come across the book and have questions about their particular retirement plan at work, especially if they are union activists. And, so I'm able to interact with them, which is exactly what I wanted to be able to do.
That's good. Now let me ask you, what is the relationship between your longtime SDS experience, your progressive work, and becoming a retirement activist? How did
Well,
this
sir,
connect?
well, yeah, well, certainly back when I was in SDS, I never would have guessed that I would become interested in retirement issues. I mean, I thought
Or
that was
live that long?
right. I mean, I thought that that was probably the most boring thing in the world. Okay, but I've become quite fascinated with it because I think it is a central part of the labor experience. I mean, you work for 30, 40 years and you don't want to go off your own personal fiscal cliff after that. And yet you want to be able to continue living as you're accustomed to living. And that's the whole point of what retirement plans are supposed to do. Now, with SDS, um, I would say that I learned every bit of organizing skills that I ever learned in SDS, and I was able to apply them to that struggle in Connecticut, which turned out to be the biggest, in terms of financial terms, the biggest organizing project I was ever a part of, because something like $400 million was transferred from 401k plans into the state pension plan as a result of the victory that we had in Connecticut.
Jim,
And
give me maybe an example of a tactic you learned in SDS that you later applied in your struggle in Connecticut, my home state, for a better
yeah,
retirement deal.
well, one was that I found that you only needed a small group of people to really organize a much larger group of people. Another was that the importance of having something like a newsletter to keep people abreast of what was going on. So very early on, we started a web serve or a list serve. And in that, we knew that a lot of people were afraid to talk about this. And so we kept it so that anybody could be anonymous, anybody could make comments. And we said to people that they should feel free to forward this to anybody. And so that thing really mushroomed. And then, things really took off because of those kind of very simple things. Another thing, which is very interesting, is every place that I went to speak, I always handed out a list for people to sign up for the mailing list. And I remember the first time I did that, somebody who was a member of the union wanted to take it over. And I think I kind of fought them to make sure that you never lose. That's your biggest, piece of valuable organizing, is to have that list of people. And so I kept that to myself. Okay,
Good.
as opposed to surrendering it and then, never being able to get it again. Because we had to do something of a struggle against unions that did not want to change things. Eventually they came along, but that's why it was a rank and file struggle.
In your writing, you talk about there is a retirement crisis. Now, what is that? What is the retirement crisis?
Well, the retirement crisis is simply that people don't have enough money to retire on. We have the so-called three-legged stool in this country, where you have Social Security, you have presumably some sort of retirement plan for work, and then you have personal savings. Well, that was never a great analogy because it turns out that for a little bit over half of people, Social Security is by far the biggest source of income. And very few people really have a good retirement plan for work. And for a number of people, that's been made worse because beginning in the 1980s, there was this huge shift from traditional pension plans where you were guaranteed something for the rest of your life to 401k plans where you're supposed to invest in the market. And in our case, again, to cite what I did before, we were paying twice as much into it and would get back half as much. And I think a lot of people think that pension plans are not sustainable because they're too costly. It was actually the opposite. In Connecticut, the cost to the state of the pension plan was less than what they were putting into this 401k plan. So, a well-managed pension plan is by far the most efficient way to put aside money for retirement.
You also talk about the Chicago Boys, and that caught my attention.
Yeah.
Who are the Chicago Boys in this case, and what did they do to retirement plans?
Well, Milton Friedman, professor at University of Chicago, is very famous for really trying to develop a kind of pure capitalism. Okay, and he was opposed to Social Security because he didn't like to see money going through government as opposed to going through the stock market. He thought that every person should just save up and then whatever would happen to them. Well, the Chicago Boys became a term in Latin America because advisors connected to him went around to a number of countries and ended up with pro-market reforms in those countries, a lot of privatization, so forth, free market stuff. In Chile, there was a man named Jose Piñera who was not a student of Friedman, but a student of Friedman. Okay, and actually went to not Chicago, but Harvard. And when the military dictatorship took over, he became a major figure in the government. And then in 1983, he transformed a Social Security-like system in Chile into a 401k type system for the whole country. And when that happened, a lot of people didn't know what to make of it. Okay, but by 2000, it was very clear that people who had been put into this investment plan were not going to get sufficient retirement income. And people who had stayed in the older plan were doing much better. Now, that's become a major issue in Chile, with hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating for a return to the older system. So the Chicago Boys, as they were called in Latin America, really wreaked a lot of havoc with people's security.
Just to be clear now, give me a way that I grasp the difference between a pension plan and a 401k.
Sure. A pension plan is a collective pot, so to speak. Okay, that, like Social Security is a pension plan. Okay, so if anybody tells you pension plans don't work, say, well, why am I getting my Social Security check, the same day every month, and and it increases every year? It works. Okay, if it's well managed, it'll work. And so it's a collective pot of money. Okay, and then it pays benefits out of that pot of money, and the benefits are guaranteed. Okay, so no matter what happens on the stock market, that's the problem of the employer or whoever's running the pension plan. It's not the problem of the beneficiary. With a 401k plan, all the risk shifts to you. Okay, you have an individual savings and a best investment account. If the market tanks, your account tanks with it. Like in 2008, people lost on average 35% of their savings in 401k plans. People who were in pension plans didn't lose anything. I mean, they had no worries whatsoever. They sailed through 2008 with nothing happening to them. But people who are in 401k plans had, a great deal of problems as a result of that.
Well, expand on that a little bit about, we hear that pension plans don't work. I know two that are apparently the Social Security, and I'm in the Screen Actors Guild, and I like them. But we hear that they're drowning in debt, that kind of thing. Is this just something foisted on us by the forces of capitalism, trying to get people to disown pension plans and move to the 401k, or what?
Briefly, you're absolutely right. Okay, and more elaborate. There are something like 50,000 pension plans besides Social Security in the United States. Most of them are quite healthy. Okay, what we hear about are the ones that are teetering on, some sort of, financial problem. Okay, and there are indeed plans like that. I mean, no retirement plan is going to work unless it is well managed. I mean, you have to, in a lot of cases, the ones that are doing badly is because they weren't funded properly over the years. Like in a lot of cases in the private sector, they were doing quite well on the market. So then they stopped putting extra money into the account. And then when the market went down, the whole thing went down because they hadn't been properly funding it over the years. But a properly funded pension plan should go on forever. The first pension plan in the world, okay, on at least on a large scale, was in Germany in 1883, and that's still going. I mean, it has gone through the Hitler period. It has gone through the communist period. It has gone through everything, and it still goes. Because whatever's going on, you've got some bureaucrats that are, doing what they're supposed to be doing to keep this plan going, and a lot of people depend upon it.
One of the things that we hear a lot, particularly from anyone, if we still are hanging out or talking to right wingers, is that Social Security is going broke. Now, if the U.S. somehow really falls, I imagine that might be true. But what's the story on Social Security? Can I count on that, or basically count on that for however many years I got left?
Yeah, I mean, they've been saying that ever since around 1979, when some private foundations that were linked to Milton Friedman began a campaign to undermine people's confidence in Social Security. Okay. And Social Security, like any other pension plan, needs to be adjusted periodically. Okay. Any accountant can tell you that you need to have as much money coming into it as are going out of it. What has happened is that it has not been adjusted since 1986, which is a long time to go
Yeah.
without adjustment. Okay, that's not exactly true. There's been a little bit of adjustment in terms of the income that you have to pay on, but not enough adjustment. So in 2033, okay, it looks like Social Security will not run out of money, but will not have enough money to pay all of the benefits that are promised to people. Now, there are very easy fixes of this by Congress. The one thing, the most popular one, is simply to remove the cap on income that is taxed for Social Security, which right now is about 150,000 a year. Okay, which for everybody watching this is well beyond our income. Okay, but for rich people, I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. Okay, for them. But even more important than that is investment income is not taxed for Social Security. If you were to start, and that's where rich people get most of their money. If you were to start taxing investment money, Social Security would be solvent for just years and years and years, and would not have to cut benefits or anything like that. So eventually, I mean, Congress is going to have to do something. What the Republicans want to do is to cut the benefits. What the Democrats want to do is to increase the revenue into Social Security. So just keep that in mind when you hear, because everybody claims that they want to save Social Security because they know it's such a popular program that there would be riots in this country if they were suddenly to abolish it.
So, James W. Russell, author of A Labor Guide to Retirement, if you had your druthers, what would you do to reform the retirement system for all of us aging folks?
Well, I would make it so that people, instead of having 401ks, could put that money into Social Security and get a bigger income in return for it. I would kind of go around the private pension plans, which because I think the problem with private pension plans is when you change jobs, it doesn't go with you. Okay, whereas with Social Security, whatever job you have, you're paying into Social Security. It's one big national pension fund. So I think that that's what we should be putting our money into in terms of reforms.
We got about a minute left, and I'm going to fire this at you. This is not about retirement, but in looking at all the books you've written, one I really love was that Escape from Texas, a novel about slavery and the Texas War of Independence. But I just discovered today that you wrote a book called the Marx Engels Dictionary. Give us at a time when socialism is getting more popular, give us a little bit on that book, real short.
Well, I'm a great believer in using words precisely, okay, to know what you mean by it. Okay, for example, if you say middle class, I mean, there's probably about 50 different meanings of that flying around. So you need to be somewhat precise. And Marx and Engels, okay, who, whatever you think about communism and so forth, they were extraordinary scholars. They really dissected capitalism, and they invented a whole set of new concepts to be able to do that. So the idea behind that book was to provide a quick reference to someone who's struggling their way through, Marx and Engels and wondering what these words mean, that are central, because it's almost a whole new language. So that was what the idea was behind that book.
Well, I'm going to have to get at that so I can really get a good definition for the petite bourgeoisie and other terms. James Russell,
That's in there.
all right. You're a wonderful guy, and I'm glad we get to talk every now and then. It's been more frequent these days. And I want to
Yeah.
thank you for giving me a nice little review of my newest book on Rising Up Angry, which I am about to send out to the masses. And as we close out, I'm also going to tell people that this show needs a little bit of financial support. You can get to me at fatback at AOL, and you give us a donation for the show, we're going to get you a copy of this book. Maybe I'll talk James into getting a copy of his book. So James Russell, thanks a lot. And everyone else, I want to thank you for tuning in to Live from the Heartland. I do want to talk about a couple of friends who have passed away. A woman named Joan Holden, who was a principal author for plays that the San Francisco Mime Troupe did. She passed away at 85. And a very good friend of ours, Fran Ainsley, who worked in Join Community Union in Uptown back in the late 60s. Went on to do a lot of great work. I was a professor at the University of Tennessee College of Law, a community activist who fought for immigrant rights. She was wonderful. And as my sister Melody James, who worked with her in the Joint Theater, said, Fran was a fabulous, warm, compassionate, creative, musical soul with her heart aimed and harnessed for justice. Fran Ainsley, we will miss you. Joan Holden, too. Everybody else, we want to thank you for tuning in to Live from the Heartland. If you missed last week's show, it was a good one. And we had Dick Simpson talking about Chicago mayors. And we had Warren Lemming talking about Bohemians. And I want to thank everyone who makes the show possible, our guests today, as well as our co-producers, Katy Hogan, who was the guest today, along with James Russell, Tom Clark, Lynn Orman, and we want to thank our engineer, Hal James. Everyone out there, you keep doing good in the world, because the world needs all the good that you do, and together we can do a whole lot, including stop the you-know-who. All right, all power to the people. Over and out. See you next week. We want to thank you for watching the Live from the Heartland show. New episodes air every Friday beginning at 9 a.m. Central Time. Episodes air each following Thursday on CAN TV, 9 p.m. in Sweet Home Chicago on Channel 21, or streaming everywhere else at cantv.org. Audio episodes go live on WLUW each Saturday, 9 a.m. on the left end of your dial at 88.7 FM, or streaming everywhere worldwide at WLUW.org. They're available on Apple and Spotify podcasts by looking up Live from the Heartland on either platform, and are also broadcast on Lumpen Radio each Friday at 9 a.m. on 105.5 FM and streaming at lumpenradio.com. I'm Michael James, and I'm glad to have been your host. Until next time, remember, do good in the world, because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we do together. All power to the people. Over and out.
Gone to limbo. Are you doing the best you can? Tell me, are you doing